Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for joining our webinar. A good Yom Tov to everybody. Anybody who knows the true significance of Yom Kippur knows that it's the kindest day in the year. It's a day when decrees are uplifted. And the Gemara says there's one other day like Yom Kippur, and that is tonight and tomorrow, the 15th of Av, Tu B'Av. It's a day when decrees are uplifted. It's a day when decrees are uplifted, particularly when it comes to relationships. So I want to begin this webinar by giving everybody a bracha, that anybody who needs a blessing and anybody who needs a decree uplifted, may it be fulfilled. There is no better person to speak to us about relationships than our very special guest, Rabbi Aaron Laine, author of GPS for a Happier Marriage. And Rabbi Laine is joining us all the way from Panama City. So first of all, Rabbi Laine, thank you for making the time. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to being inspired this evening. Over to you.
Good evening. Thank you, Rabbi Masinter, Rabbi Hecht, and your communities. I guess in some places it might be in the morning or afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you for joining me. I hope that at the end you'll be so optimistic, as Rabbi Masinter said, and it'll actually make an impact and a difference to relationships. So actually, first of all, I have to mention that I have a very special connection to South Africa. Not only because we're both third world countries, no, that was just a joke, but my aunt and uncle, Rabbi Yassi and Rachel Goldman, moved to South Africa many years before I moved to Panama. And I'm going to guess they're watching, so a big shout out to them and my other cousins that are there. You know, I have a big dilemma, because I was given only 40 minutes for a talk that takes an hour. So I had to choose if I take out the jokes or take out the content. That's a problem. If I take out the jokes, the people that don't like the content are going to be upset. If I take out the content, the people that don't like my jokes are going to be upset. So anything you don't like about the talk, you can blame Rabbi Masinter for taking out 20 minutes of my talk, and it'll be okay. Oh, good. So let us start right away. I believe I'm the co-host here, so I can put on my PowerPoint. But before that, I just want to say, why would a rabbi decide to write a book on marriage? As you heard, I live in Panama about 27 years ago. We are in a total lockdown for about 5 months, which means we can only go out 3 times a week to the supermarket. So the situation is not so simple. But when I came to Panama, I was married about 6 months, and I was already receiving visits and people asking me questions about marriage. I realized immediately I better figure something out about this, or else I'm going to have a serious problem in my community. And that is how this book begins to evolve. It was released about 4 years ago. Baruch Hashem, it has very good reports. And if you hear my talk and you enjoy it and you think it's worthwhile, you can actually pick it up on Amazon. So let me set this up. No. One second. No. Okay. Here we go. Okay. So the book is called GPS for a Happier Marriage. So about 10 years ago, one of my presidents said it could be a worthwhile. Are you seeing my screen or not? Do you see the screen?
No, we're not seeing your screen.
Try this
See
again.
you.
One second. How about now?
I see Har Sinai.
Good. Now we're fine. Okay. Just one more time. Okay, let's start. Fine. I think we passed the technical problem. So So about 10 years ago, my president says you should definitely write a book. What you have to say is a little bit different, and we'll see if you guys agree with me. So mainly, the main reason I write a book is because of this first slide that you can see. Har Sinai. What does Har Sinai have to do with marriage? And I believe that this is my main reason I wrote the book. Because if we're here to pass over traditions and the importance of Judaism to our children, there is nothing more important than having a solid and good marriage. And for two reasons. Obviously, if we're trying to teach our children values and our kids look at us and don't see that we practice what we preach, they see parents that are fighting, that are aggressive, how are we going to give that? How are we going to transmit the importance and the beauty of Judaism to the next generation? And besides that, and equally important, although, as we know, unfortunately in the world, divorce is not uncommon, and many people from divorced families have been able to make beautiful lives and beautiful homes, but there are many challenges, and many people's self-esteem or children are affected, have to go between two homes. And if we want to give our children a good advantage and a true healthy advantage, we need to make sure that their home is a safe haven, where they have two parents that put discipline and not each one trying to outdo the other and prove that they're better or worse. So these are two important elements which I find critical to be able to transmit Yiddishkeit to the next generation. So after intermarriage, our second greatest challenge today is marriage. And as we know, unfortunately, that the divorce rate is quite high, over 50% in most of the developed countries. The younger you are, the greater the divorce rate. So I'm not going to talk about the divorce rate. I would like to ask, how many of the people that are married, the 50% that stay married, actually are happily married? And the statistics show that it's not such a high percent, maybe 17%. So my objective tonight, or my passion, is to see how to help people get into the highest bracket, the best relationships. Because if you have a good relationship, there is nothing greater in life. As we will see from what Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, shares with us. So just give me a basic outline of what I'm going to try to teach you today. The first thing I'm going to try to teach you is marriage will fail. The nature of marriage is it will fail. And imagine when a couple comes to my office a month before their wedding and I'm giving them a talk about marriage, I say, by the way, I'm going to try to convince you that marriage will fail. Do you think I can do that? So if the couple says no, okay, that gives me a challenge. When the couple says yes, I start getting worried. If a month before they're married, they think I can convince them their marriage will fail, we're actually in trouble. But my objective in the next 15 minutes is to convince every one of us that marriage will fail. And obviously, the question is, why would a rabbi who's supposed to teach Judaism and the importance of family and relationships, why does he want to convince anyone that marriage will fail? And the answer is, the greatest mistake is that people think that marriage can work by itself. And if you think marriage can work by itself, you'll become surprised. Why is it that the relationships aren't working and there's issues? If we understand the truth of relationships, that they can't work by nature, then we can figure out the system. So let's go straight into it. But before that, let me ask you a simple question. Simple question is, what are we looking for? What do you think people in life are looking for? 99% of the people I ask this question to answer happiness. That's fine. It sounds like a good answer. To be happy. Everyone wants to be happy. In America, we call it the pursuit of happiness. Now, to be happy, I'm going to argue we need only one thing. Can you guess? What is that one thing we need to be happy? All of you might have different opinions, but eventually they need to add up to this following slide. To be happy, you need to have a healthy self-esteem. If you have everything and you're depressed, you're not going to be happy. If you want to be in Forbes 500 and you're missing 2 or 3 slots to get there, and you're working on it for years, you are obviously unhappy. Although you have everything you want, you don't have what you want now. So a person who is happy with what they have, sameach bechelkoi, has a good self-esteem, will be happy. It has nothing to do with what or what you don't have. It's a mindset. And I'm going to try to convince everyone here today, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that men's self-esteem and women's self-esteem comes from different areas. But before we go there, I need to make sure it's clear and make a disclaimer. What we're going to teach you today is a generalization. There are exceptions to every rule, what we call the masculine qualities and the feminine qualities. And just yesterday, something I usually don't say on my talks, but I saw yesterday, a Pew questionnaire. As we know, the famous Pew, they usually make different types of questions, made a survey in 2017. And the overall majority of people agreed that there are differences between men and women. The big question or the discussion is if it's nature or nurture. Is it biology or the society? But regardless what you believe, if you believe that our differences are based on biology or society, the fact is, as of now, there are differences. And understanding those differences is really vital to have a happy relationship. From a Jewish perspective, from a Torah perspective, there are differences, biological. But regardless your belief, today, the facts are, we are different. That's proven in science, and I'm going to spend a couple minutes to prove it right in front of your eyes, because understanding this, to me, is the key to understand how to have a happier relationship. But before that, let's ask some biblical questions. Since we're Jewish, we believe in the Torah. Can anyone explain to me why? Shlomo HaMelech says, Matzah isha matzah tov, marriage is great. He says that in Proverbs, in Mishlei, and then in Kohelet, he says the opposite. I have discovered something that is more bitter than death, the wife that you have given me. How does this make sense? Either marriage is good or it's bad. One might answer, well, King Solomon had 700 wives, 300 concubines. Of course, he had good ones and bad ones. But if this is part of Judaism, there's an essential message to us. And the real message, which we'll get to eventually, is marriage can be the best or worst experience. And this can be in the same day. But before we explain this point a little bit further, let me ask you another simple question. Many of you might be aware of the question Rashi poses on this verse that God says. God says in the beginning in Bereshit, it's not good that man is alone. I will make him a helper against him. So many of you might be familiar with the question. Why a helper against him? It should be a helper for him, right? And Rashi has an interpretation. But I would like to ask a different question. Listen, it says it's not good that man be alone. Are we sure? I know many men that prefer to be alone than in a bad relationship. How are we so clear? Why do we say it's so emphatic? It's not good for man to be alone. So if I remember at the end of today's talk, I'll answer this question. If I forget, please remind me. So let's get straight into it. I'm going to say, like I mentioned, men or women are different. Let's spend a couple minutes understanding this. What percentage of preschool teachers are women? Give me an answer. Okay, very good. Now let's go to the other extreme. How about what percentage of university professors are men? 75%. We see it starts off women in elementary school and things start changing, and eventually you have a 75% men professors. Why? Who prefers competitive jobs? Who prefers working in a team? Believe it or not, this is what Harvard says. Study in Harvard has 2-to-1. Men prefer competitive jobs. Women prefer working in a team. Now, remember, Harvard has the toughest and smartest women of the country, in the US. And even there, you see a 2-to-1 preference of women working in a team and not competitive jobs. Sounds different to me. Who talks more about personal things with their friends? You probably all know the answer. I didn't even have to put it. What would a woman do to lift her spirits? What would a man do to lift his spirits? I guess we'll agree. I don't know, today in Panama, all the malls are shut already, so they're having a hard time. They have to shop online. So yes, women will preferably go shopping and men will take a drink or do something else, some other pleasurable act. See if you can fill in the last word of this sentence. Men fall in love with their, women fall in love with their, correct. Men fall in love with their eyes, women fall in love with their hearts or with their ears. Very different. What starts the attraction, what eventually ends up in their marriage. Which spouse gives a higher rating to their marriage? If you ask women or men, do you think you have a good relationship? Overall, men think their relationship is better than their wives think. Now, why would that be? You would think it should be 50-50. Why would it be more women thinking that the relationship is worse and men think the relationship is better? Who is more into sports? Well, I just saw a statistic last week. Real fans, diehard fans, 42% are men and 13% are women. Well, that answers the question. So, now to go a little bit deeper. I'm sure if you're on this talk about marriage, you heard about a bestseller book, well, not mine yet, GPS for a Happier Marriage is mine, but a famous book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. It sold over 55 million copies. It speaks about differences of men and women. So what's the chiddush? What am I bringing to the table? So what I want to bring to the table today is not just that there's differences of men and women, or like the 5 love languages. What I'm trying to help people understand that the differences are much deeper. It's not just I do it one way, you do it a different way. What I want to tell you is that we're wired differently, and what we seek for our self-esteem is different. And if we understand that, we'll understand the challenge of relationships and how to be successful. So here, we're coming now into the main message of today's talk. Can you help me understand? I say men's self-esteem depends on three things with the letter P. Women's self-esteem depends on 3 things with the letter A. Think about it. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to think. If you're there with your wife, talk about it. If you're there yourself, what do men look for every day to build their self-esteem with the letter P, and women with the letter A? Okay, let's see if you got it. Were you right? Do you know each other? Yes, men look for power. Number 1, power. The second P, prestige. And the final P is pleasure. Men look for prestige, power, and pleasure every day. A man wants to be successful and make money. And I didn't say men look for money. You know why? Men don't look for money, besides the fact that money is not a letter P. No. The reason is because money buys you prestige, power, and pleasure. Money itself has no value. Makes sense? Okay, so if we identify that, if you're a man that identifies with these 3 Ps, and like I mentioned, there are women that are more masculine and men that are more feminine, but that's not today's topic. Overall, this is how we describe the male characteristics. What do women look for their self-esteem with the letter A? Some of you are surprised because really, it's not the letter A, it's the letter L. But if you speak Spanish, amor really works. For in English, we'll say it's affection. Women look for affection. They want to feel loved. When I ask this question to anyone, 99.9%, maybe 101% of the women, when I ask them, what do you need for your self-esteem? Everyone's, or better, what do you need for your happiness? The overall response is love, affection. Second A, appearance. If you ever went to a mall, you see how many stores cater to men, how many stores are there to sell women their needs, and it's overwhelming majority have more items for women. And if you have a doubt still because you haven't been at the mall, walk into your closet, count how many shoes you have, how many shoes the man has, how many shoes the wife has, and this should be clear. Appearance. The third A is a sense of accomplishment. We do remember that in the olden days, the sense of accomplishment basically was your family. A woman getting married, taking care of her family. Today, it has evolved. Women have careers, not just their family, but regardless, it's a sense of accomplishment. This is a way to describe the differences. And if you think about what we said before, identify all the issues we had before. Remember, prestige. Why more professors are men? More women are preschool teachers. They're more connected. Affection, okay? Prestige is being a professor. Power, sports, hand wrestling, pleasure, okay? Versus what we said, women prefer to talk to their friends about their relationship. They have friends forever. The affection part. So I think this is very clear that there's a very stark difference, regardless if it's nature or nurture, between men and women. If all of you or any of you agree with this theory, you can tell me why marriage will fail. Why? Is it clear? So most people will say, well, Rabbi, of course, because we have different interests. So I'm going to tell you it's much deeper than that. But before I give you the final answer, let's go a little bit further. What do men like to do after dinner? What would women like to do after dinner? Tell me if this makes sense. Overall, the majority of people tell me men prefer to watch TV or some other pleasurable activity. Women prefer to talk. Now imagine, I gave this talk a year ago to a group of people in Panama, a couple married 45 years, okay? I asked them this question. The husband said, TV. The wife said, talk. And I was amazed. I said, wow. This woman, 45 years, hasn't been talking to her husband after TV because he's watching television, obviously. And she still remembers that she prefers to talk. I mean, that's an unbelievable memory. Second question. How does this work? Imagine a couple had a dispute, a problem, a fight. And the woman would like to fix with her husband. And she realized it was her fault. Usually doesn't happen. But she decided. Would any woman think of giving flowers to her husband? Send him a bouquet of roses? You know it wouldn't happen. Why not? Why doesn't it make sense? What would the husband do if he received flowers from his wife? He would probably say, what a waste of money. However, if the opposite was true, and a husband was trying to fix a fallout he had with his wife, and he brought her flowers and a nice card and said, I'm sorry, how would that work? You all know, everyone has to have a little bit of experience. Can anyone explain to me, how is it possible that a flower can change a woman's mood? I have no clue. I know it works. Yes, of course. So just like men prefer to watch TV because it's pleasure, correct? And women want to talk because that's affection. Flowers to a woman means affection. It talks to them. I just want to backtrack for a second. And I want to mention a quick story. A wife tells her husband after dinner, let's talk. The husband says, talk? We spoke already. The wife says, we spoke? When did we speak? So what do you mean? At dinner. You remember you asked me, how was my day? And I said, okay, thank God. Then I asked you, how was your day? And you told me that it was hard to get in the morning. And when you finally got up, you couldn't find the shoes that you were looking for. You remembered that the dry cleaners wasn't picked up the day before. The kids were disturbing. Your mother-in-law called. Your sister is not agreeing with you. Then you wanted to get the lunch and you couldn't get it up because you spoke for 10 minutes. The wife thinks for a second and says, well, you're right. What I'm trying to say is, I want to spend time with you. The husband says, oh, good. Now I understand. If you want to spend time with me, come watch TV with me. What does the wife say? No, I want to talk. Now the man is totally going nuts. You said you wanted to talk. I explained to you, we spoke at dinner. Now you say you want to spend time with me. I invite you to watch TV and you say you want to talk. So you're going in circles. So what's happening here? Again, if you understand the P's and the A's, as long as a man is looking for his self-esteem in his P's, he's looking for pleasure now. And a man speaking to his wife doesn't understand that that fills his self-esteem. However, for a wife to speak to her husband, that is so exciting. Believe it or not, it's unbelievable. When a husband comes home from work, for his wife, that's an exciting moment because affection is part of her self-esteem. Let's go to the third point. Talk about these three words that every couple knows is very important. Before I got married, a friend of mine said, don't forget, you have to tell your wife you love her every day. I go, really? Why? Obviously, if we're married, we love each other, right? We have to remind her. That reminds me of the story. The guy comes home the night of his wedding and says, my dear wife, you know I love you with my heart and soul. You're the most special person in the world. But I need to tell you that I don't plan on repeating the words, I love you, until I stop loving you, which means tonight's words and declaration of I love you should last until I stop loving you. When I stop loving you, I'll say, no, honey, I don't love you anymore. Can that work? Now, if you ask men, logically, it makes sense. If we're married, we obviously love each other. Why do I have to repeat it? If you ask any woman, you'll understand very clearly that if you don't say it time and time again, there becomes an issue. Does that make any sense? To us, no. To them, yes. Because a woman is wired up with affection. That's what she needs for her self-esteem. And words of affection are important, are vital for her self-esteem. That's why women think that their husbands need to hear that they're loved as much as they need. The truth is not. They need to hear words, different types of words, as we'll get to soon. So, what's the conclusion? And I think this, if you pay attention to the next 2 minutes, you'll hear what's really vital. Based on what we just said till now, men's self-esteem depends on their prestige, power, and pleasure. Where is their spouse? Where is their wife? Not in their prestige, not in their power, in their pleasure. That pleasure has a limited amount of time per week. But if a woman needs from her husband the sense of affection and love, and we know affection means attention, appreciation, admiration, acknowledgement, a woman who needs to feel that attention, how many hours a day is that? What do you think? You all know the answer. A woman needs to feel loved 24/7. A woman needs to feel she's her husband's priority all the time. She obviously realizes they're not going to hold hands 24/7, but she needs to feel that she's her husband's priority 24/7. But if a husband is looking for his peace, where is he? For her, when he's looking for his prestige, power, and his pleasure. You know where she is? You know where he is? He's far away. And when a wife feels that her husband is just thinking about himself and not thinking about her, and she's not on the radar, automatically, she's not getting her affection. She's going to be affected. And she's going to start feeling sad. And she's not going to tell her husband, well, I don't think you love me. What? Are you crazy? I told it to you every day. What do you mean I don't love you? What she's basically seeing is that his priority or his interest or his passion is not her. It's him. So as long as we're wired up differently, our marriage would automatically fall apart. We're going in different directions. And like we see on this slide, it's not that we don't understand, it's we can't understand. Try to explain the color green to someone who's colorblind? You ever tried? Colorblind, he doesn't know what the color green is. So you're going to say, it's not black, it's not blue, it's not red, it's not, what do you mean? What's green? So we're trying, men, we need to understand our wife, and our wives need to understand us, and we just can't. And this is the critical part of relationships that we need to figure out. When I got married, happily, 27 years ago, I think my wife said this 28. Don't tell her I just told you this, okay? So when I got married, I said, it's obvious. We both have similar needs, right? We need to eat, we need to sleep, we like to work, to have a good time. How different can we be? And that was my biggest mistake. Therefore, I couldn't understand, why is my wife sad? I was saying she's manipulating. She wants to manipulate me. It's all a game. It's all a technique, or it's tactics. Until I understood really how different we were. Everything changed. And that's really the key. So for all those of you that are wondering, does this sound any hard Jewish proof, biblical proof to this? I'm going to say yes. Let me see if you remember. Those of you that got married a couple of years ago, what are the commandments? What does the Torah tell a man he has to do for his wife? Do you remember? Here it is. The Torah says a man has to provide for his wife. She'era, ksuta, ve'onata. Clothing, food, clothing, and conjugal rights. Marital relations. This is the obligation from a husband towards his wife. Can anyone tell me, what does a wife have to do for her husband according to the Torah in the Bible? Does anyone know the answer? The answer is absolutely nothing. If anyone finds me one biblical commandment for a wife to her husband, you get a free membership in my synagogue for the rest of your life. You know why? There is no obligation. That sounds crazy, ridiculous, ludicrous. How is it possible that our machista religion, male chauvinist religion written by the rabbis, would tell men what to do for their spouses and not give one commandment for their wives? Biblically, this doesn't make any sense. Can you answer the question? If you really understood today's talk, you have the answer to this question. By the way, now you know why the ketubah is written in Aramaic. Anyone would sign such a document? They have to be nuts. A document that says, I have to take care of you, and what am I getting in return? Nothing. Well, the answer is very simple. The answer is basically, God is telling us, if a man takes care of his wife's needs, she will automatically take care of his needs. If a wife takes care of her husband's needs, that is not a guarantee he will take care of her needs. A man is connected to his prestige, power, and pleasure. Like we mentioned, his wife is not part of his radar, not part of his priority. At least he's not wired that way. And of course, every husband that's listening to this talk will tell you or say, no, it's not true. My family is the most important thing. Of course, maybe in your head, not in how we're wired. So Judaism says, take care of your spouse. But why don't we tell the wife what to do? We don't have to command a wife to be a good wife. That is natural. Of course, there are exceptions. And if people have other issues, you should look for a professional help. For normal people, this is how it is. Like I said, this is the Torah. The Torah says, doesn't give women any commandments. Here's another example, biblical example. First year of marriage, men were exempt from going to the certain wars, not the Milchemes Mitzvah, not if it was an obligation, but the optional wars, men were exempt. The Torah says you should take care of your wife. V'simach es ishtay. Make your wife happy. It doesn't tell the wife to make her husband happy. Doesn't make any sense? Totally. Remember, men's self-esteem depends on other areas. His wife complements his self-esteem. A woman's self-esteem, affection, depends highly on her husband. And therefore, women need to find other areas to get self-esteem. But the way Hashem designed it is that men look more for the physical part, and women depend more on the emotional part. And there's plenty of science that proves this. I'm not going into this point. And it doesn't mean that men have no emotional needs and women have no physical needs, but overall, understanding this is really the key to success. So now that we know the problem, and I have only 5 minutes left, let me give you some quick solutions. The truth is, I don't feel I have to give you any solution because you have the solution. If you understand this, so a man, when he walks home, comes into the house and sees his wife is a little upset and starts nagging him, instead of taking it personally and be going on the defensive and no, why are you complaining? Just let him understand there's something I did unintentionally that made my wife feel unimportant. If I don't jump into the ring, I just take care of her affection. Let her feel that I'm there for her, and I apologize if I did something unintentional. You fix the problem. Don't jump into the ring. It's not about you. You didn't do anything intentionally against your wife, but there's something you did that made her feel unloved. So how are you going to fix it? By saying you're wrong? No. Get it in your mind. A man can control his wife's emotions. God said to Eve after she sinned, you will desire your husband. And like the famous book of Men Are From Mars, what he basically says in one word is that men, when they have a discussion, they want to move away. Women, they're feeling upset. They look for connection. Again, the P's and the A's. So what's the best thing I can tell you? Women need to feel that they spend quality time with their husband, not just when he wants. Spend time with your spouse. You need to find things you have in common, although they might be very little, and have a good time together. Talk and laugh. And that is key. A wife who feels that her husband spends time with her, not 24/7, but daily, enough time to fill up that emotional need, then she can function better as a wife and better as a mother. You need to find that time. There's a best-selling book, a different one, by John Gottsman called The Guru of Relationships, 7 Habits for Highly Successful Relationships. And basically he says, if a person invests 4 hours a week in his marriage, he can change around a bad marriage. And he says 20 minutes a day talking and going out once a week. And think about it, how could a bad marriage be fixed in 4 hours of investment? And based on what we said today, it's very simple. Most women and people who get divorced say the main reason was there was a lack of commitment, which can be understood as I didn't feel that my needs were being met. And that's the point. For our wives to feel that their needs are being met, she needs to be emotionally filled. And that is literally finding things you can do together with your spouse. And then she will take care of her husband's needs. In simple words, how to please your wife. Actually, in the book GPS, as you've seen already, it has a whole list of ideas. But here, in simple words, make sure you give her compliments. Don't take her for granted. Make sure she always feels she's your priority, not your friends, and not your volleyball night, and not other things. And make sure to bring her flowers and gifts. How to please your husband. Show him appreciation. Boost his ego. I said men do not need to hear as much that they're loved, but they do need to hear that they're special and that they're great and they're unique. And make sure to communicate with love, even when a wife is feeling upset. She felt that her husband didn't respond to his phone call or didn't answer his WhatsApp or didn't do whatever. Bring out the stuff with love. And by the way, everything I told you tonight, you can find it in one law of the Rambam. The Rambam says, women should treat their husbands like a king. A man should love his wife more than he loves himself. Think about these 2 words, which include everything. King, prestige, power, love, affection. And for simple words, if we said that men are connected to P's and women to A's, let's rearrange it. Let's change it. Let's get women connected to the P's. Let men do new P's on their list and the women get their new A's. First thing is, a man needs to learn how to please his spouse. This is part of a relationship. If you got married to a person thinking what they're going to give you and not what you're going to do for them, you made a big mistake. Marriage is about what I can do for my spouse. How can I please you? Stop thinking about what they can do for you. Second P, purpose. This itself is a whole talk. But according to Judaism, marriage is not just an institution God made for us to have a good time, to enjoy, to have a family. No. It's about the individual achieving his purpose. How? We by nature are selfish, and marriage, for it to function, you need to learn how to be selfless. Giving, forgiving, taking care of someone else. This is the objective of creation. Taking a selfish human being and making him more giving. That's our purpose. That can mainly function in a good relationship. If your marriage is working, is because you're giving more than expecting. Purpose. And the third P is peace. Remember, men like to change the world. Our rabbis tell us, if you create peace in your home, you create peace in the entire world. That's an unbelievable accomplishment. And to the women listening, let's get our new 3 A's. We need to learn how to articulate. Women have expectations. Their wife should understand. Their husband should understand what I'm thinking. If I'm sad, they should know what they did wrong. Of course, they should figure it out. No, men have no clue. Okay, they're clueless. Articulate. Women need to educate their husbands. And even though they didn't understand it the first time or the second or the third, you need to continue with patience to articulate your needs. And if you do that, there's a greater chance things will change. The second A, accept your spouse. Remember, your husband has nothing against you. He actually loves you, believe it or not, but he's so wired differently. And yes, if by nature he moves to somewhere else, which is the television, and you need to connect him, find the right way to do it. He's not doing it against you. He's just wired differently. And the third A, as I said before, affirm. Make sure you say those words that make him feel appreciated. He's a hard worker. Don't take anything for granted. And this way, obviously, coming from Tisha B'Av, which we spoke about the destruction, this is definitely the way to reach the construction of the third Beis HaMikdash. And before I pass over the mic back to the rabbis, in simple words, remember, when we get married, we have certain expectations. For marriage to work, we need to put in effort. And if you thought you were in love and it was the best thing, it was just a facade. That's not what marriage is all about. That is a mistake because people think if we're in love, it'll all work out. No. After you get married, you need to invest. And not only invest much more, because the relationship that develops after marriage is not the same one as in courtship. You need to invest much more time and much more effort. But I can guarantee you, and let's come back to the first verse we said, Matzah Isha, Matzah Tov. You remember, we mentioned, Shlomo HaMelech says, marriage is great, Matzah Isha, Matzah Tov. But, Umotze ani et ha'isha, the next verse in Kohelet says, I find marriage is worse than death. If you're looking for ani, your selfishness, yes, marriage is terrible. But if you're looking for a relationship, matzah isha, matzah tov. And to answer the question I asked at the beginning, how does it say, God says it's not good man is alone. Let's give him a helper against him. And here is the answer. Of course, maybe physically, for my selfishness, it's better to be alone. But it's not good for your spiritual development to be alone. Lo toiv heyot ha'adam levado. Alone, that's the worst thing. I will give you a helper. It will seem she's against you. She doesn't agree with her. You have a different perspective. But the objective is for you to grow. Yes, and that's the explanation of this verse. And I wish you much success in your relationships. And let me end off with 2 lines. The first line is, they say, don't say jokes about marriage. The women don't think they're funny. The men don't think they're jokes. And finally, they say marriage is when man and woman decide to become one. The trouble begins when they're deciding which one. Thank you very much. I wish you all success, and I hope everyone is healthy and taken care of, and Hashem should bring us big miracles. We should get out of the situation quickly, speedily, with the coming of Mashiach.
Yossi, Rabbi Hecht, you're on.
Okay, I thought it jammed. Is Rabbi Laine there?
No, he's there. If you could ask some questions.
Oh, Yashikayach, Rabbi Laine. Wonderful listening to you. And I'm sure we've all learned a lot. I just thought we have an opportunity to speak to a rabbi and a shliach from the other side of the world. We'll get off the topic for a moment. Could you tell us a little bit about your community, about the Jewish community of Panama in general, and about Chabad in Panama in particular, in a couple of minutes? You've already mentioned about how you're in lockdown, and it sounds worse in Panama than it is in Johannesburg, but we've also been in some sort of lockdown for 5 months. But anyhow, if you could just educate us a bit about your community and about the community at large in Panama.
Okay, so I'm actually the Ashkenazi rabbi of the Bethel Synagogue. I came here 27 years ago. Panama is generally divided in a majority of Sephardic Jews. We have 80% of the community are from the Sephardic community, mainly of Syrian descent. Like I said, we're the Ashkenazi community. Baruch Hashem, there's a very beautiful relationship. 99% of kids go to the Jewish schools. We have 30
What is
kosher
the Jewish population?
We have about 15,000. I'm not sure after Corona how many are going to be left, but 15,000 is the number. Like I said, there's many kosher restaurants and eateries, and Friday, most of the Jews live together in like a little neighborhood. So Friday night, you see everyone walking. It's a very beautiful. Let's put it this way: 5 months ago was very beautiful. Obviously, our shows are closed, and it's not as beautiful as we would like it to be. It's a very traditional community. Most Jews keep kosher homes, and it's a very warm community.
Sounds very much similar to the South African Jewish community. What in particular has Chabad brought to the community of the Panama Jews?
So actually, like I mentioned, I'm the Ashkenazi rabbi. We do have a couple of Chabad houses that mainly work for the tourists that come, the Israeli population here. We have a certain island called Bokas that has a Chabad house, a place called Bokete. Obviously, as a rabbi of the community, I brought some of the camp. When we came to Panama, there were no Jewish camps. We started the camps and other activities, social activities. So Baruch Hashem, it's been very successful. And we have a very, very good relationship with all the members of both communities.
Very nice. Okay, let's go back to the subject of marriage. When Rabbi Masinta asked me to give the vote of thanks and to talk a bit, I said to you, he asked me, am I familiar with your book? So I said, no, unfortunately not. Now you can't even buy books here. So they said, I could get it to you. I said, Rabbi Masinta, I'm afraid to read it because I might find out that I had a terrible marriage for the last 45 years. So thank God I wasn't disappointed tonight. I'm still Baruch Hashem. What you said, and if I could, in my way of thanking you, wrap it up in a little teaching that Dr. Ira Weiss taught us from the Rebbe, I think that will be a beautiful bouquet on top of your perhaps it was part of your notes, but you left it out to give me something to say. So Dr. Ira Weiss was the Rebbe's cardiologist from 1978, which means he knew the Rebbe for 15, 16 years, and he would visit him a number of times a year just to give him a general checkup. And he had a very unique and special relationship with the Rebbe and the Rebbitzin and the Rebbe's wife. He was both of their personal doctors. And he related that the Rebbe once told him that every day he comes home in the afternoon and he spends 15 minutes talking to his Rebbitzin, to his wife. I'm sure he did it. And but what was more important and more telling was that the Rebbe said that those 15 minutes he spends talking with his wife are as important as when he puts on tefillin in the morning and davens. And I think that's such an important insight into marriage. And it's really what you said, but I think I'm just saying it in different words. And yeah, and there's some people who could who could talk for 15 minutes and say nothing. But I'm sure when two people like the Rebbe and the Rebbitzin spoke in their 15 minutes, they accomplished a lot. And I don't know if it's 15 minutes or 20 minutes. And in fact, it fits in pretty well with what you mentioned from this other professional of 4 hours a week. So the Rebbe was pretty much on the money. And but it is important to spend time. And yes, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And perhaps we're all guilty of not doing it, but time is probably one of the most precious things for a marriage to thrive. So in thanking you, I want to thank you so much for enlightening us, for being very much down to earth, speaking, as they say in Yiddish, he spoke to the point without beating around the bush too much. And especially today, I don't know if it was mentioned, Rabbi Masinta introduced the day of Tu B'Av, of Chamisha B'Av, the 15th of Av, that it is on parallel to Yom Kippur. But what the Mishnah in Tainus tells us, in addition to all the wonderful things that we celebrate, is it was a day when the young women went out to meet young men. It was a day which was rife for making shidduchim. I take it that that's why we decided to have this talk tonight, because it's a day when we could start relationships, shidduchim. Many people choose this day to get married, a wonderful day to get married. And if you're already shidduched, if you're already engaged and you're already married, then it's definitely a day which is empowered with improving and embellishing and uplifting and exciting that wonderful relationship. The relationship in husband and wife, which is ultimately the relationship between the Jew and God, which will be culminated, which will come to its final destiny when Mashiach comes and rebuilding of the temple, and there we will celebrate the great celebration. And by then we will be on the other side of this terrible plague, and we'll be able to have weddings with music and dancing and excitement and celebration. So once again,
Rabbi Hecht, I would just like to mention that in Corona, in quarantine, obviously the challenges of relationships are much, much greater. So those of your listeners that are having a hard time, join the club. No, that's very normal, okay? This cannot define your relationship. But at the same time, I think it is very important in this time to make time with your spouse, because although we're home all day, some people can be home all day and spend very little quality time with their spouse. So it's really important. It's also important to make sure that we can tell each other daily that I'm sorry for all the things that went wrong. We're living on different levels, stress levels. People have fears of health issues, money issues, dealing with kids in the house. So really, this is a very trying time, especially for relationships. Take it with a grain of salt, but work harder, because a good relationship can get better in quarantine and a bad relationship. Yeah, I hope it only gets better. Yeah.
Very, very true, and yeah. Okay, so I think our time is coming to an end. So I want to, on behalf of all the listeners, on behalf of myself, Rabbi Vicente, and all the Chabads here, thank you so much for spending your time with us, for sharing your knowledge with us. We wish you Hatzlacha Rabbah, great success in all your undertakings, the personal undertakings, communal undertakings, family undertakings, etc., etc. And together, we and you should get out of this terrible pandemic, and Jews and non-Jews and all of humanity should get beyond this and be able to live not only normal lives, but better than normal lives. And hopefully we'll have learned to be better people, kinder people, more patient people through this experience. So once again, Yeshikayach, and I hope we'll be able to see you soon in person, in the flesh.
Anyone who wants to get the book, they can get it on Amazon, okay? Amazon, you can get it. There's an audio book, there's a Spanish book. So whoever wants Amazon.com, you can pick up the book.
Wonderful.